A family vanishes without a trace. A husband confesses to murder. But where are the bodies? The Toledo Family Murders shocked a quiet Florida community, leaving investigators scrambling for answers. Welcome back to Abyss of Crime. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to keep up with the darkest true crime stories. In this chilling documentary, we unravel the dark secrets behind one of the most haunting crimes in recent memory. From jealousy to betrayal, follow the twisted path that led Luis Toledo to destroy his own family. A framed photograph sits on a mantelpiece, capturing a seemingly perfect family moment. Yessenia Suarez beams at the camera, her arms wrapped around her two young children, Thalia and Michael. Standing beside them, Luis Toledo wears a broad smile, the picture of a devoted husband and father. But behind this facade of normalcy, a sinister truth lurked, waiting to shatter the illusion of domestic bliss. The Toledo family appeared to have it all. Yessenia, a 28-year-old mother of two, worked as a human resources professional at American Canine Detection Services. Luis, her 31-year-old husband, held a respectable job as a graphic designer. Their children, 9-year-old Thalia and 8-year-old Michael, were bright and well-loved by their community in Deltona, Florida. However, Luis Toledo harbored a dark past that he had carefully concealed. Before meeting Yessenia, he had been deeply involved in the Latin Kings gang, rising to the rank of warlord within the organization. His criminal history included convictions for armed burglary and kidnapping, painting a stark contrast to the family man image he now projected. As time went on, subtle signs of trouble began to emerge. Yessenia's co-workers noticed her becoming increasingly withdrawn and anxious. She would sometimes arrive at work with unexplained bruises, offering vague explanations that didn't quite add up. Luis displayed possessive behavior, constantly checking up on Yessenia's whereabouts and monitoring her phone calls and text messages. The pressure continued to build within the Toledo household. Luis's jealousy and controlling nature intensified, creating an atmosphere of tension and fear. Yessenia found herself walking on eggshells, never sure what might trigger her husband's anger. The children, too young to fully understand the dynamics at play, sensed the growing unease in their home. The catalyst for disaster would come in the form of a simple text message, one that would confirm Luis's worst suspicions and set in motion a chain of events that would end in tragedy. As the facade began to crumble, those closest to the family started to notice the cracks. Yessenia's mother, Felicita Perez, grew increasingly concerned about her daughter's well-being. She urged Yessenia to leave Luis, sensing the danger that lay beneath his carefully crafted image. But, like many victims of domestic abuse, Yessenia struggled to break free from the cycle of manipulation and control. The first public glimpse of the turmoil within the Toledo family came on October 22, 2013, when Luis confronted Yessenia at her workplace. In a fit of rage, he slapped her in front of her co-workers, shattering the illusion of their perfect marriage. This incident would be the last time anyone outside the family would see Yessenia and her children alive. Little did Yessenia's co-workers know, but that shocking confrontation was merely the tip of a sinister iceberg. Behind closed doors, a more insidious drama was unfolding, one fueled by suspicion, technology, and a fateful decision that would seal the family's tragic fate. The unraveling of the Toledo marriage began with a simple text message. Luis's worst fears were confirmed. Yessenia was having an affair with a co-worker named Kevin Dredden. The discovery of the affair sent shockwaves through Luis's already fragile psyche. For someone with a history of violence and a need for control, this revelation was like a match to gasoline. As Luis's suspicions were confirmed, the arguments between the couple intensified. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices more frequently. The once quiet household, now a pressure cooker of emotions. Luis demanded to know Yessenia's whereabouts at all times, scrutinized her every interaction, and isolated her from friends and family. The psychological impact of infidelity on their unstable relationship was profound. For Luis, the affair was not just a betrayal of trust, but a challenge to his dominance and control. His self-image as the family patriarch was shattered, and in its place grew a toxic mix of rage, humiliation, and a desperate need to reassert his authority. Luis used tracking devices to monitor Yessenia's movements, further tightening his grip on her life. This digital leash served as a constant reminder of her perceived transgressions and fueled Luis's growing obsession. As Luis's inner turmoil reached a boiling point, those around him began to notice changes. His co-workers at the graphic design firm observed his increased agitation and frequent phone checks. Yessenia's friends noticed her withdrawal from social activities and her reluctance to discuss her home life. The children, Thalia and Michael, became quiet and withdrawn, sensing the tension that permeated their home. In that moment, the facade crumbled completely, revealing the violent individual lurking beneath. The public confrontation at Yessenia's workplace was just the beginning. Within hours, the lives of Yessenia and her children would take a devastating turn, their fates sealed by a decision that defied all warnings and logic. As night fell on October 22, 2013, an eerie quiet settled over the Toledo family's Deltona neighborhood. Despite the violent confrontation with Luis at her workplace, Yessenia made the fateful decision to return home with her children. As the evening progressed, neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from the Toledo home. The arguments that had become all too familiar in recent weeks seemed to reach a fever pitch.
It was around 10:30 p.m. when I heard screams. They were unlike anything I'd heard before, raw and terrified. I considered calling the police, but then everything went quiet. I'll never forgive myself for not making that call.
The timeline of events that unfolded that night remains shrouded in mystery. What is known is that sometime between the late evening hours of October 22nd and the early morning of October 23rd, Yessenia Suarez and her 2 children vanished without a trace. Their last known moments paint a haunting picture of a family in crisis, trapped in a cycle of violence that was spiraling out of control. As investigators would later piece together, the house at 317 Covent Gardens Place became the scene of unimaginable horror that night. Blood evidence discovered in multiple rooms told a grim tale of violence that had exploded behind closed doors. But the most chilling aspect of the case was yet to come: the complete disappearance of 3 innocent lives. What exactly transpired in those final moments? Did Yessenia realize the grave danger she and her children were in? Did she try to escape? These questions would haunt investigators in the community for years to come. The last known moments of Yessenia Suarez and her children remain a tragic mystery, their voices silenced in the darkness of that October night. As dawn broke on October 23, 2013, Luis Toledo's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. At 6:11 a.m., he knocked on his neighbor's door with an unusual request: help moving Yessenia's car. This seemingly innocent plea marked the beginning of a frantic cover-up that would unravel in the days to come. Toledo's actions in the hours following his family's disappearance painted a picture of desperation. Witnesses reported seeing him meticulously cleaning Yessenia's car in a supermarket parking lot, scrubbing every surface with an intensity that raised eyebrows. Inside the Toledo home, a similar scene of frenzied cleaning unfolded. Investigators later discovered multiple empty bottles of cleaner and a soaking wet shower curtain discarded in a trash bag outside. Despite Toledo's efforts to erase all traces of a terrible crime, he overlooked crucial areas where evidence lingered. Forensic teams, armed with advanced technology and keen eyes, uncovered what Toledo had missed. The master bathroom, despite its spotless appearance, held a grim secret. Using specialized techniques, investigators discovered 23 bloodstains belonging to young Thalia in the bathroom and 4 more on a closet door in the master bedroom. These tiny specks of blood, invisible to the naked eye, told a horrifying story of violence. Toledo's oversights extended beyond the house. A discarded boot bore a small but unmistakable speck of blood. The trunk mat from Yessenia's car, which Toledo had attempted to dispose of in a trash bin miles away in Sanford, also carried traces of blood. Each piece of evidence chipped away at Toledo's carefully constructed alibi. As investigators pieced together the timeline of events, Toledo's actions became increasingly suspicious. His early morning car cleaning, the disposal of cleaning supplies, and his attempts to remove potential evidence all pointed to a man desperately trying to cover his tracks. But in his panic, Toledo had left behind a trail that led directly back to him. The discovery of blood evidence in the seemingly pristine house was the final nail in the coffin of Toledo's innocence. Despite his best efforts to scrub away all traces of the crime, he couldn't erase the truth. The bloodstains, though microscopic, screamed volumes about the violence that had occurred within those walls. As Toledo sat across from detectives in the interrogation room, his story began to unravel. What seemingly insignificant detail would become the key to unlocking his dark secrets? Detective Sergeant A.J. Pagliari had seen his fair share of suspects, but something about Luis Toledo set off alarm bells. As the initial questioning began, Toledo's demeanor raised red flags. His responses were vague, his body language tense. When asked if he thought his wife and children were alive, Toledo's answer was chillingly non-committal. "I feel they're alive." It wasn't the confident assertion of an innocent man, but rather the calculated response of someone hiding a terrible truth. The interrogation stretched on for days, revealing layers of Toledo's complex psyche. His past as a Latin Kings gang member surfaced, hinting at a capacity for violence and a deep-seated need for control. This background provided insight into his reactions under pressure, as Toledo oscillated between moments of bravado and vulnerability. Toledo's story was a shifting landscape of lies and half-truths. He claimed to have been asleep in his car during the time of his family's disappearance, but witness accounts and evidence contradicted this alibi. As investigators presented him with the mounting evidence, Toledo's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. The psychological strain of maintaining his lies began to show. Toledo's behavior became increasingly erratic, revealing a man struggling with inner turmoil. He displayed an unusual fixation on cleanliness, repeatedly asking to wash his hands, a possible manifestation of guilt, or an attempt to symbolically cleanse himself of his actions. As the questioning wore on, Toledo's slip-ups became more frequent. He inadvertently revealed knowledge of details that only the killer would know. His timeline of events didn't match the evidence. Each inconsistency was another crack in his facade, another step closer to the truth. The breakthrough came when detectives confronted Toledo with irrefutable evidence of his lies. In a moment of anger and frustration, Toledo's mask slipped. He blurted out a partial confession that sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Toledo admitted to killing Yessenia with a single blow to the throat, claiming it was an act of rage after confronting her about her affair. But even in this moment of seeming honesty, Toledo's manipulative nature shone through. He steadfastly denied harming the children, instead implicating his neighbor, Tyshawn Jackson, in their deaths. This deflection tactic revealed Toledo's inability to take full responsibility for his actions, a common trait in family annihilators who often struggle with narcissistic tendencies. Toledo's partial confession was a chilling revelation, but it was clear that the full horror of what happened that night was yet to be uncovered. The fate of Thalia and Michael remained a mystery, their bodies still unfound. As investigators pressed for more details, Toledo retreated back into silence, leaving a community in shock and a family desperate for answers. While investigators hit a wall with Toledo, the streets of Deltona began to whisper. Candlelight flickered in the darkness, illuminating faces etched with fear and disbelief. But as the community gathered to mourn, little did they know that the most chilling revelation was yet to come. The disappearance of Yessenia Suarez and her children sent shockwaves through Deltona, Florida. As news spread, residents struggled to comprehend the unfolding tragedy. Candlelight vigils became a nightly occurrence, with hundreds gathering to pray for the family's safe return. The flickering flames symbolized hope in the face of growing despair. The revelation of Luis Toledo's violent past and his confession to killing Yessenia intensified the community's fear. Neighbors who had interacted with Toledo now recoiled at the memory, horrified by the realization that a killer had lived among them. I heard a car door slam around midnight and saw Luis loading something into the trunk of Yessenia's car. He seemed agitated, kept looking over his shoulder. I thought it was strange, but I never imagined, a neighbor recounted. As the community grappled with these revelations, a grim reality set in. The monster they feared wasn't an unknown predator, it was someone they knew. This sparked a complex mix of emotions: anger at Toledo's betrayal, guilt over not recognizing the signs of trouble, and fear that such evil could exist undetected. As volunteers scoured every inch of Deltona and beyond, they clung to the belief that answers lay just beyond their reach. Little did they know, the true horror of the Toledo family's fate was hidden not in the earth, but in the mind of a killer. What chilling confession would forever change the course of the investigation? The search for Yessenia Suarez and her children consumed the community of Deltona. Law enforcement agencies, alongside hundreds of volunteers, embarked on an exhaustive search operation that stretched across 3 counties. They combed through dense woods, waded through murky retention ponds, and scoured every possible hiding place, desperately hoping to find any trace of the missing family. Teams employed advanced technology, including infrared cameras and sonar equipment, to scan inaccessible areas. Cadaver dogs assisted, their keen noses capable of detecting even the faintest traces of human remains. Helicopters provided aerial support, searching for anomalies in the landscape that might indicate a burial site. As days turned into weeks, the emotional toll on the searchers became increasingly apparent. The initial surge of determination gave way to exhaustion and frustration. Each false lead chipped away at their hope, leading to feelings of helplessness among those involved. The challenges of searching for missing persons in vast areas became painfully clear. The terrain around Deltona offered countless potential hiding spots: dense forests, swamps, and abandoned properties. Every inch of ground needed to be meticulously examined, a task that seemed insurmountable given the scale of the search area. In a particularly poignant moment, a volunteer stumbled upon a child's toy deep in the woods. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, it seemed like the breakthrough they had been praying for. But like so many other leads, it turned out to be unrelated to the case, leaving searchers grappling with renewed despair. As weeks stretched into months, a grim reality began to set in. The possibility that they might never find Yessenia and her children loomed large, casting a long shadow over the search efforts. The agonizing wait for answers took its toll on everyone involved. Yessenia's mother, Miriam Suarez, pleaded tearfully, "We just want them back. We need to know what happened to my daughter and my grandchildren." Her father, Carlos Suarez, added with a trembling voice, "Please don't give up." The community, once united in its determination to find the missing family, began to show signs of fatigue. Volunteer numbers dwindled, and the media spotlight on the case began to dim. Despite the increasingly slim chances of success, some refused to give up. Investigators continued to follow up on every lead, no matter how unlikely. They combed through dumpsters and local landfills, leaving no stone unturned in their quest for answers. But as time passed, the heartbreaking realization set in. The bodies of Yessenia and her children might never be found. In the shadows of justice, a daunting question loomed. How could prosecutors convict Luis Toledo without the victims' bodies? This challenge tested the limits of forensic science and courtroom strategy. State Attorney R.J. Laritza pursued murder charges despite the absence of remains, placing the case among the rare but increasingly successful no-body murder trials. Tad DiBiase, an expert on such cases, notes that most of the 517 trials since the 1830s have resulted in convictions. The prosecution relied on meticulous forensic analysis, with blood evidence from the Toledo home becoming key. Each microscopic blood stain told a story of violence, helping investigators reconstruct the sequence of events. Toledo's defense attempted to discredit the timeline, suggesting alternative scenarios and revisiting his claim implicating neighbor Tyshawn Jackson, which investigators had dismissed. The prosecution, however, presented a compelling narrative. Jealousy over Yessenia's affair as Toledo's motive, bolstered by witness testimony and his controlling behavior. Chilling details included 23 bloodstains from Thalia found in the master bathroom. Despite the absence of the victims' bodies, the evidence painted a grim picture. The jury deliberated and ultimately returned a verdict: guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder for Thalia and Michael Otto, and 1 count of second-degree murder for Yessenia Suarez. A heavy silence filled the courtroom as the weight of justice settled over all present. As the echoes of the guilty verdict faded, one chilling question remained. Where were the bodies of Yessenia Suarez and her children? For Yessenia's mother, Felicita Nieves Perez, the aftermath became a haunting journey through grief and unanswered questions. Despite the conviction, closure remained elusive. "I still cry every day," Felicita shared, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I hope that one day God will guide someone to where they are, or Luis will speak up." Her words reflect the emotional limbo her family endures, caught between hope and despair. The long-term psychological toll on families of murder victims is profound, with Felicita struggling to find peace while clinging to the memory of her loved ones. In the face of loss, Felicita has transformed her pain into advocacy. She organizes events commemorating her family's disappearance, raising awareness about domestic violence and its devastating impact. "We belong to a family you don't want to belong to," she said, acknowledging the community of survivors bound by shared grief. The Toledo case exposes the deadly consequences of domestic violence and psychological manipulation, highlighting the hidden dangers behind closed doors. It serves as a stark reminder of the importance of recognizing warning signs, like controlling behavior, isolation, and escalating aggression. As we reflect on this tragedy, we must ask, how can we prevent such horrors? Supporting organizations that combat domestic violence and raising awareness about abuse are vital steps in saving lives. Though their voices have been silenced, the story of Yessenia, Thalia, and Michael echoes as a haunting reminder of the human cost of unchecked violence and the enduring pain it leaves behind.